I just saw The Martian in this theater. I sat right up there on the mezzanine. It was on Monday.
Those are great seats right there.
Those perfect seats.
Theater.
Not a lot of theaters with mezzanines in it anymore. Nobody in front of you.
That's
You can knock a Diet Coke off the rail.
Don't do it right now, please. So we're gonna have a couple of questions, and we're gonna take some questions from this audience,
Good.
and then other questions from around the country, people that are watching live right now. So Stephen, I'm going to start with you. I saw the movie the other night at Lincoln Center, and some of the Donovan and Powers family members were there.
That's right.
What kind of reaction have you had from them, and what kind of help did you have from them while you were making the movie?
Well, when you're telling a story about, the next generation of someone who really did, such remarkable work in his time, the first thing I worry about is, are they going to accept the fact that this movie is representative in an honorable way of what their dad did? We had all 3 kids of James Donovan, and we had Gary Powers Jr. and his wife. And it was great because they absolutely saw the movie. They were emotionally very overcome by it. And his son, who was 18 at the time and actually traveled with him abroad, really gave us some, I don't want to say we got it all right, but we got enough of it right that they are very proud of the movie.
And they showed up at a premiere the other night, so clearly they were.
They did, yeah. They showed up. They
Showed
saw
up
it
to
second. They saw
support.
it twice. They saw it twice. No, it's really scary because when I make a movie that's about something that happened in history, we make Private Ryan together, and I've done Amistad, and I certainly did Lincoln. There's no one to tell the tale except historians, and it's so amazing when you actually can reach out and touch the people who were touched by the great work of James Donovan.
And Tom, what kind of interaction did you have with Donovan's family?
Absolutely none whatsoever. Just the facts. It's tough because the reality is, as Donovan, I'm going to say things he never said, go places he never was, and do things he never did. But inside that, there is an authenticity that you have to strive for. They came around the set when we were shooting out at the house. Yeah,
and the son did. Yeah.
So I had a degree of interaction, but it's a surreal circumstance, because on one hand, our job is not to fuck up their lives. Pardon me for pardon the F-bomb there. I didn't mean to. But at the same time, we must adhere to a number of cruel realities, and one is that it's a cinematic experience. Right. The other is that we are dealing with their lives. If we didn't call the guy, Frank Monovan. His name is James Donovan, and you're really taking on something that really happened. So the desire is that that they forgive us for our shortcomings, and they forgive us for those moments where, all right, the house didn't get quite that shot up when the time came. Figurines weren't exploding.
That's my fault. The house was shot up. A bullet came through the window.
Yeah,
came close to Mary Ellen, the youngest daughter. I, of course, put 6 bullets through the window. I was doing an interview with Marty Scorsese last night at the Directors Guild, and I said, Marty, what would if this had been your movie, what would you have done? And Marty said, I would have put 20, 30 bullets through the window.
The house would be gone.
And she was not eating peanut butter at the time. That's the other thing that really gets.
Yes, but we were all watching 77 Sunset Strip.
Well, that's true, too.
Yeah.
You notice in the TV screens, there's an awful lot of marching Russians a lot of times on the TV screen. It's like, what show are they watching, for crying out loud? What happened to Bachelor Father, or, the Ed Sullivan Show?
So Christy, your producer, who's here, said that when this crossed her desk, and Matt Charman, who wrote the original script or had the original idea, was sort of an unknown British TV writer mostly.
He was.
But when she got the idea, she said, "This is right up Stephen's alley," and I wondered why she would think that.
Well, I think because my dad had something to do with the story. My dad in 1960 went on a foreign exchange mission. He worked for General Electric in Arizona, where I was raised, and GE sent in the spirit of détente 5 American engineers to Moscow, and Moscow sent 5 Russian engineers to General Electric for a 3-week exchange of information in the spirit of, humanity and conversation. And my dad, who spoke a little Russian, because all my great-grandparents and 2 of my grandparents were born in Russia. And I was raised with Yiddish, Russian, and English spoken when I was very young. And my dad went to Russia, and it was just after Gary Powers had been shot down, and the Russians put all the pieces of the U-2 in a kind of U-2 museum, and Gary Powers' helmet and his flight suit was all on a display, and all the Russians lined up, 2-hour wait to get to line, and my dad was waiting about 2 hours to see the pieces of the U-2 when a Russian soldier with medals came over to him and his delegation, asked to see their passports, and then led them and gave them cuts and brought them right to the front of the line. And I guess they were thinking, wow, this is pretty good. They like us Americans. They're taking us to the front of the line. That's not what happened. They got to the front of the line, and the Russian colonel, turning bright crimson, looked at my dad and all of his friends and pointed to the U-2 remains and said, look what your country is doing to us. And he said it over and over again. And my dad was terrified because he thought he wasn't going to get his passport back. That was what he was really afraid of. So I had some knowledge of Gary Powers from that incident when I was 13 years old. I had no idea about the existence of James Donovan, the Soviet spy Rudolf Abel, the economics student Frederick Pryor. This all came to me by way of this writer from the UK.
And did you always have Tom Hanks in mind as soon as Zac Efron had said no?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Zach was making a movie at the time.
Thank God,
Yeah.
thank God he was unavailable.
I thought that if Tom sparked to the script, we always love working with each other, but it's all about the script that makes these determinations for both me as a director and Tom as an actor. And I just had my fingers crossed he was going to like what he read, and I think you.
I went berserk when I read it. I mean, it's just insane.
Did what kind of preparation did you do with Mark Rylance? Because that between
that's
Abel and
interesting, yeah.
Donovan is it's such an interesting dynamic in the movie.
Well, because I know how Steven shoots, and I know that he empowers actors to come to the set with ideas, and then he feeds off of those. And the worst he'll say is, we're going to do something else. But Steven wants the people who he has hired to be in movies to come in hungry in order to show him something that is beyond what's on the page. I mean, you have to know the dialogue, but the dialogue is just the beginning of greater ideas that he wants us to have. So I called Mark. I was very much aware of Mark's career as a stage actor. I'd seen him many times, and I'd met him fleetingly at one point. But we were going to start shooting on like a Wednesday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and it was going to be an intense day because it was going to be our first meeting and much of the stuff that happened in that holding cell. So I called Mark. I said, we really should get together and just get to know each other, so we don't have to spend time, in that little dance. Hey, how are you? I'm fine. I love you. Oh, I think you're great too. Da-da-da-da-da. Where do you live? I'm staying here. So you get that stuff out of the way, and then we ran all of the scenes for the better part of an afternoon. And we just said the words over and over again and examined what we were saying, so that by the time we got there, we were in sync with each other's timing and each other's intentions, so that we could start afresh on that day. You sort of, there's no substitute for familiarity with the text. Mm-hmm. That's where you begin. But there's also no substitute for a lack of self-consciousness, and a few hours spent together really puts the kibosh on self-consciousness. Were there a lot of conversations when you were making the film about how you were going to bring the audience around to the idea that Donovan is defending this spy? Because especially when I saw it the second time, you're very aware of a couple of key scenes where Donovan talks about why it's important to give this man a fair trial and why it's important to treat him as well as we can. Even though your first reaction, even as an audience member, like other people, like other characters in the film is, but wait, he's a spy. Why do you care so much? And there's particularly the scene with the CIA agent after he catches you in the rain, and you explain it's about the Constitution, it's about our rule book.
That was the real Donovan. I mean, and he stood on his principles. He's a very moral, ethical man. who had done some amazing stuff in World War II. He was United States Naval Reserve, and he was the legal consultant on putting together the documentary, along with the two great filmmakers, George Stevens and John Ford, that was shown at the Nuremberg war crime trial. And
Prosecuted Nazis.
And he did. That's how he started. And then he went from that to defending insurance companies. I'm not quite sure what the
Prosecuted
of that was.
insurance.
He went for the money. There was more money in insurance than Nazis, for sure.
But
God bless America.
I think when ethics meets ambition, when you get an ethical man and an ambitious man, that's where this whole idea of Donovan's was 2 for 1. We start the movie with him arguing that point. You know, it was one accident, not five things didn't happen.
Yeah,
one thing happened.
It
was a litany
quite
throughout
a
the
dance
story.
of rationale there that goes on. But treason is executionable offense. Does that make sense? Capital offense. You can be put to death because of treason. And I immediately, literally, I finished the screenplay and went on Google, put in James Donovan, and came up with a number of pieces on YouTube. And one of them is from the trial. He's being interviewed out at the courthouse, and he says, quite frankly, Rudolph Abel is not a traitor. You'd have to be an American in order to be a traitor. He's a guy who's doing his job just like we have people doing their job over there. And if we execute this man for espionage, we open the door for anybody being arrested and accused of espionage for being executed. You have to be an American, be a traitor, and he is not a traitor, so he has not committed treason. So he had this very, very specific sense of what was right and wrong. Then, he had to go off and defend against the other crimes that, there were crimes against, being an illegal alien and not registering and all that stuff. But that was part of the game. The larger legal principle that he was fighting for was a very, very simple one. And we say it in the movie. The Rosenbergs were traitors. He's not a traitor.
It was justice for all.
And I'm not saying Rosenbergs were traitors, but never mind.
So this is your fourth film together, Bridge of Spies, right. The Terminal, Catch Me If You Can, Saving Private Ryan. You also produced The Pacific and Band of Brothers together. So I wanted to ask a few questions about working together over the years. And do you remember the day that the two of you first met?
You remember that day, don't you?
Well, it was on the Money Pit. I was just a guy in the office, but I was about to start a movie called The Money Pit, which was for Amblin, and I got called over to Universal, and it was unique to me because it was the first time I had a drive-on pass to the Universal lot, which was a big deal. And I had to go on and find the big, massive Taco Bell locale that is the headquarters for Amblin. It's got this kind of like Southwest Santa Fe kind of quality to it. And I waited in an office for a while, and they said, okay, you can go up now. Richard Benjamin, who directed The Money Pit, was there, and I went up and I was introduced to you.
First time we met.
Shaking and quivering and not quite, not quite sure of what the point of it all was.
I just wanted the guy that did Splash. I said, I wonder if the guy that did Splash, who's really a funny guy, is going to want to do a movie, which is a funny movie, but isn't about such a funny subject, about somebody who buys a house and has to pay 10 times more for the house because the house is falling apart. Has anybody seen The Money Pit, even on television?
A long time.
Okay,
there
great.
There you go.
Great.
God bless Netflix, I tell you. But I was giving
that was the first time.
giving monosyllabic answers. I didn't know what to say. I can't. Yeah. And that was my conversation with him. But that was the first time we met. But then we met later on with our kids and our wives, and we were just guys then. By that point.
And then we became friends, and then we were friends for a long time before we ever determined that we were going to have a relationship professionally as colleagues, director, actor. That happened for the first time on Ryan. And I know I wanted Tom wanted to do it, he wanted to be in the movie, and we had to agree to do it together. But the first question I think we asked each other was, because it's a prickly business sometimes, and sometimes you get loggerheads with each other, and all I cared about and all Tom cared about was saving the friendship. We didn't want to do this if we weren't going to survive our first time working professionally together. And once we started working on the script together, there was no chance that was going to happen.
Yeah. And he's the boss. I'll do what you say, boss. What do you want me to do, boss? I'll do what you say. I'll do what you say. I'll come in with some ideas. If you don't like them, just say you don't like them, and we'll do something else. But you're the boss.
One of the things that Tom kept reminding me of, he kept saying, look, I got this Tommy gun. will you let me use it? Can I fire it in the movie?
He didn't want me to shoot
I
it
didn't
for the
want-
longest time.
I wanted to hold back Captain Miller
What's
firing the
point?
Tommy gun.
What's the point? Stephen, please, you gotta let me gun down some Nazis. And eventually he did. The first time I got to fire it was when they come out of the Amtrak on the thing.
They come out of the half
I say,
track,
move
yeah.
move up on the flank, move up on the flank, and they popped out of there, 4 beautiful stuntmen all lined with squibs, and I took them all out. And then in the next scene we meet Matt Damon and he's Private Ryan.
Exactly.
It was like literally that's.
It was
that
actually, that scene was one shot.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
What was the toughest location you were ever on together?
Together, the toughest location?
Oh,
It had
that
to-
one there, that was probably tough.
Yeah, that was probably on the bridge.
All the others are like fun movie making, and they're by and large pretty comfortable on a set. But that was so freezing cold. I can't tell you how cold that was.
Oh, because it was
Terrible.
cold.
Well,
It was
that's in
December.
Berlin. That's
That's
the
a real
bridge.
joint.
That's the Gleeniger
That's
Bridge
the
where
real
the actual
bridge.
spy exchange took place. The swap took place on that bridge. They closed the bridge down for us for 3 nights. We shot all night. It was absolutely freezing. The only person who wasn't cold was the Chancellor of Germany, Merkel, who showed up to visit the
Came
set,
by,
wearing fall apparel.
Yeah.
And we were in North Face with the hoods and the packs in your hand.
The German crews, they were tough, but we were, it was just so brutal. There's, in the movie, there's a little house there, the little Czech house where the guy calls on the phone.
Yeah.
We had 12 actors crammed in there between
crammed in
shots.
there with one floor heater.
It
That
was so.
But it was cold. It was also hard. It was a hard shoot. All the locations.
It was
in
tough.
Poland, in Berlin. That was the toughest part of the film.
They were just telling me there's a question on the monitor, but I don't see anything on the
We don't
monitor.
see the monitor. The
monitor's
monitor's
not
not
on.
The monitor's not on. That's
someone,
okay. I have other questions.
All right.
If first Tom.
Yes.
If you had to go home tonight and watch one of your movies, what would it be?
Please, jeez. On what? HBO? What?
Just on anything, on your television.
Well, they're all such personal things. I'd have to say the movie that the only movie of that I can watch over and over again is That Thing You Do, because I wrote it.
That's fantastic.
Oh, you're all right. You're all right. That's good, because so much happened. One of the things about the movie was it kind of came out the way I imagined, and the music was so infectiously fabulous, and all the cast loved to be in the band and whatnot. And there's a moment in the movie where, right after up through the Mercyhurst College talent show, I'm a father of 3 kids. And in the next scene, I'm the father of 4 kids, because one of my kids was born during the making of the movie.
Yes.
So that's the only one all the rest of, the problem with these movies you're in is they never change. Once you see them, it's not like they're longer, better, there's a better angle of you. They're locked in stone, and if you hate any moment of it, you hate it for the rest of eternity.
That's so true.
I leave the room sometimes when they come on the
Stephen, what
Showtime.
would yours be?
Oh, it's a hard question. I was thinking about what my answer would be when Tom was talking, and it's a really, really hard question. I have trouble watching my movies, except I can watch them when I'm showing them my kids for the first time. Like, I won't watch E.T. by myself, but I've shown E.T. to every one of my 7 children at the appropriate age. And I enjoy watching a movie like that I made through their eyes, because I see it in a different way every time. And with each kid, it's a different experience. But me alone in a room watching a movie, I guess it would have to be Raiders of the Lost Ark.
There you go.
I could watch that. I could watch that.
That was a perfect length for applause for Raiders of the Lost Ark. By the way, we'd both be watching these movies with the gun you're holding to our head, because we don't do this. No. We don't scan the grid hoping to see one of the movies.
I was once doing my show on Sirius Radio, and Colin Firth was there. I asked him this question, and I think he goes, I'd watch A Single Man, which is a beautiful movie that he did a few years ago. And I said, well, wouldn't it be Love Actually? Because that's one that everybody else would watch. And he goes, I think I have a very different relationship to that film than you do.
Yes.
Not happy about it. Now that the monitor is on, Ben from Alamo Draft House in Yonkers.
Oh, holy cow.
He says, hi, Tom and Steve. The film's opening sequence was largely devoid of dialogue or noise. What did that represent to you?
Well, first I want to say hi to everybody at Alamo because you had a festival and showed a lot of my movies, and I want to thank you for that and say everybody out there at Alamo, hello. So, hello.
Let's hear it for Yonkers. That's the perfect amount of applause for you.
Well, you know, my movies are usually filled with wonderful music of Johnny Williams has, except in this film, where John physically wasn't able to do it, but is doing my next movie, BFG. I hired Thomas Newman to do the score. But all my films have been uplifted and really almost transformed through the work of John Williams. He sort of tells the second story. I tell the first story with the writers and the cast, and then he tells a musical story that really takes it up many, many, many notches. But on this movie, even when I knew that John was scoring it, before I found out that he wasn't able to, I had determined that the entire opening of the film would have no music at all, that we wouldn't even have music for about 35, 40 minutes. Because in shooting the movie in New York City, I became very enamored of just the symphony of New York, what it sounds like, just to keep your ears open. And not think about where you're going and what you got to do next, but just listen to New York. And it's a score. It's a score that all of us have had a hand in composing. And so I got so excited doing nothing but sounds in all the sequences we shot in Brooklyn. And we had a great sound crew that just did details. They just grabbed little sounds of pigeons, and sounds of people stepping from a curb to a street and cars going by, both on a slick, wet street and on a dry cobblestone street. And the sound people put together a beautiful wash. And that was the score for the beginning of the movie.
Tom, did that have any effect on you whatsoever?
When I saw it, I said, hey, there's no music. I had nothing to do with that, so, I was as enthralled as anybody. But
this is a good question. Mark from Cinemark in Dallas. For Tom, why is your hair white today?
Well, I've been very stressed. I forget that it is. It's for the movie that I'm shooting right now about Sully Sullenberger, who landed the plane in the Hudson River. So, and he has white hair. It's very hard to dye my hair white. It turns out it took a lot of time, and eventually they had to stop doing it because it was white enough, and the people at the hair salon said, your scalp can't take any more of this.
It's really convincing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
I've
been wearing a hat, and I just got sick of wearing a hat after a while. So.
By
the way, I want to give you a look at your future, my son. This is what this is what you're going to look like in about another 10 years.
If I have that much hair, I'll be grateful.
Well, all you need is a few $1,000s.
That's true. 25,000 to be exact, because I've looked into it.
It ain't cheap.
It's not happening. From the Yahoo live stream audience, Tom, how does James Donovan compare to the other heroes you have portrayed, and what differentiates him?
Well, the use of the word heroes is I got problems with that, because the definition of a hero is somebody who voluntarily walks into harm's way for a cause bigger than his own. Mm-hmm. All right? Can we agree with that? Donovan does not necessarily do that in this case. What he has is he's very confident of his own abilities. And he took on the defense of Abel because it is a principle of pro bono work. It does come down to we have a Miranda law that says if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be assigned to you. So it is part of the American consciousness, the whole idea of America, that you are entitled to an advocate when you are brought up for charges. He believes that, and so he was willing to take on the job simply because of that. He did it because he was also supremely confident in his negotiating skills. Mm-hmm. He was very, very, very good at it. So that even when it comes time to go off to Berlin, which you might say he took some danger in order to do, he was doing it quite frankly because his country asked him to. The CIA is equal in his mind to the President of the United States. In fact, he did negotiations for President of the United States later on. And so when the time came,
the Bay of Pigs,
for the Bay
which
of
is
Pigs,
a fascinating aspect
he
of that
got more
guy.
people out than was asked for, because that's how damn good this man was. So you know, the other folks I played, Jim Lovell in Apollo 13. You know, what was fascinating about him was he had to make his peace with not achieving what he wanted to achieve. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. John Miller in Saving Private Ryan. That's a complete. That's you know, this is World War II. It's a different confine that goes into the individual choice and motivations of why the character does it. But I would say that my favorite aspect of playing Donovan was his innate knowledge of his innate confidence of his own abilities. James Donovan knew he was a badass when it came down to negotiations, and I think that's why he enjoyed it so much, because as a matter of fact, he was. And I did a lot of reading, and there's a hint of it where he says "hot dog," you know, when the phone call comes in. When he got over his cold, he did have a debilitating cold, because the flight over was on a bad Air Force American jet, and he caught a horrible cold on the way. When the cold was over, he could not wait to get back into Berlin. Come on, let me take, because he wanted to kick some commie ass. So he really enjoyed doing it.
But the other thing to always remember is none of these characters think they're heroes or even view themselves as heroes. It's something in the afterglow of a win, some kind of a huge victory, that others assign that to you. It's nothing you ever think of as being worthy of carrying that. And Donovan would never say, yes, I'm a hero. That was not for him to ever label himself.
And in this film, it's so interesting because Abel, certainly, Donovan and Powers are all vilified by other
They were all
characters, and
vilified, yes.
with Abel, the audience, certainly, even, and the evolution of those characters and the way you think about them is really interesting.
Well, the thing, you know, the thing about this movie was when I was growing, I'm 59 years old. I was born in 1956, and all the time I was growing up, until I was 20, it was understood that there would be a World War III. It was inevitable. They made jokes about it on Star Trek and The Twilight Zone. You know, there was, well, let me tell you, is this like the 1 million of your Earthlings who were killed in the First World War, Captain Kirk? Or what about the 60 million that were killed in your Second World War? What about the 350 million that were killed in your Third World War? You know, they had all these kind of lines like that. So, and when it was going to happen, it was going to be us versus them. It was going to be the United States of America in the West against the Soviet Union and all the other communists in the East. And it was going to happen. And the trick was we had to win it. And maybe we had to win it quick, or maybe we had to win it over the long haul. But it was going to happen, and quite frankly, the 60s, it was until the 60s were done, there was a sensibility both in the newspapers and in the media, as well as every other kind of like a confine of society, that it could happen at any moment.
We had air raid drills all the time in school. The sirens would blow, and I was in the 8th grade, 9th grade, sirens would go off. We would jump under our desk. We would take a heavy textbook, cover our heads with it. We were shown
to protect yourself from a nuclear blast.
Yeah, to a 50 megaton blast.
Geometry book will do that.
Well, no, history would be better. History can protect you over arithmetic.
Yeah,
arithmetic
that's
was very
true.
thin.
Thicker, more stuff,
It was
more
much
pages.
thicker. But then they wheeled the AV guys. I was an AV person in school. We'd wheel the Bell and Howell projector and audio-visual. What does that mean? It probably stands for something
IT
today.
now, yeah.
It's IT now. And they would show these 16-millimeter films with Bert the Turtle, telling all of us to be smart like this turtle. And when you hear the sirens, to see the flash, you pull your head into your shell. Find the equivalent of a tortoise shell. And these were instructional films that terrified us. We'd go home at night and just look at, my sisters and I would look at each other, and we would all say, we're never going to get our driver's license. We're not going to get the 16. That's just not going to happen. And that was a clear present danger during the Cold War.
I love in the movie where in the kids that they're showing at school, they show real bomb blasts, you know, real houses being torn apart, real forests being leveled, and then Bert has like cartoon debris that's going past him as he's going by. Cartoon radioactive debris. That was.
Rachel from AMC in Minneapolis. What was your favorite part of filming this movie? This is for both of you. And what did you find most difficult?
Oh, my favorite part was clearly any time I could have Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance in the scene together. I mean, I so look forward to those occasions when they were going to act in the same space. And kind of just for the audience, he decided to hold back some of the scenes so you would start missing them as friends. So when they finally reunite at the Gleanaker Bridge, it was meant to be a bigger moment because you hadn't been exposed or experienced so many scenes before that. So anytime they were in a room together, that was the day I looked forward to.
You know, I think my favorite moment, I've talked to Mark about this, is when we're reunited, when I'm on the bridge already and he pulls up in the car. And we don't we don't hug, we don't shake, we just say, good to see you again. And then when he leaves, you know, in the wink of an eye and it's all over. Yeah. That really struck me as you know, almost an example of human behavior and most accurate.
And I think the most difficult was how cold it was on the bridge for everyone except Angela Merkel, who's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the other difficult thing about it was just trying to mine all the details from Gary Powers' life, because we had his memoir, we had Donovan's memoir, we had details that we could layer and layer and layer, making the characters more truthfully rich. I mean, just things like the cold that he actually had. We didn't know about it until we really started researching James Donovan's life in East Berlin, doing this mission of his. There were just so many delicious details. Like, for instance, I didn't know, and Gary Powers Jr. told me that his father had forgot to hit the 70-second destruct switch on the U-2 when the U-2 was hit by a ground-to-air missile. And the whole, and this really happened, the canopy popped. He was sucked out, but he was left dangling from his oxygen tube. And he actually had the wherewithal, as the plane is plummeting, gliding somewhat, but falling like at about probably 20 feet a second, hand over handing, which he did on this oxygen tube, just about getting to the destruct switch, and before he could flip it, it broke. The tube broke, and he was sucked out. I mean, those are things that we didn't initially know about, and when we discovered moments like that, opportunities like that, it went right into the movie.
Did Donovan actually have his coat stolen?
Yes, he did.
Berlin?
Yeah, by East Berlin Toughs.
Exactly.
Yes, he did. Yeah, yeah. Didn't help his cold at all.
No.
You know, it's interesting because it's a movie, and invariably it looks kind of glamorous. You know, such things as the Berlin Wall and getting through from one side to another. We had we had an awful lot of our crew who grew up and were old enough, certainly, and some grew up in the East and some grew up in the West. That's right. The odd banal details of trying to get from East to West were really a palpable thing. It was not glamorous at all. It was meant there just to screw up your lives, and they did it extremely well. And it was a hard reality that they had to go through every single day. We kind of make it look cool, because we got costumes and fake tanks and things like that. But it was not cool. It was a very oppressive atmosphere.
Right. Julia from Scotiabank in Toronto. Tom Hanks, in real life, are you as good at winning arguments as your character?
Oh, dear, no.
Is Rita Wilson here? Because
no, I can tell you, I'm known as the great capitulator at my house. I just say, hey, just asking, easy, done, forget it. Didn't say a thing. I'm with you, whatever you want. No, I'm horrible. I cave.
So you don't negotiate like Donovan?
I'd like to say I win by not negotiating.
Okay.
That's what I'd like to say.
Evan at Regal UA 16 in Denver. For both of you, how do you maintain movie magic in the time of remakes galore? And also, Tom, my mom loves you.
Well,
That's from Evan. Well, my mom loves you too.
I got a gal at home. So.
I never think about, when I'm making a movie, I'm working on a film, I don't think about it in context with remakes or sequels or big franchises. I just try to find material that compels me and keeps me awake at night. Something doesn't let me sleep, I'm by and large going to direct that. I'm going to exercise that until I can sleep. So I get so caught up in a story like Bridge of Spies, and I was completely immersed in that. I don't think it bears much relevance to other movies that other filmmakers are making, because other filmmakers are making huge, big films. We made a really big film this year called Jurassic World that Colin Trevorrow directed and we produced. Anybody see that movie? But that didn't distract me or make me think that I had to be competitive with that, or that there was not room for Bridge of Spies and Jurassic World, that there's not room for movies that are mid-range movies, smaller independent films, films that whisper a personal message, compared to other films that just are in 3D hurled at you. I think there's room for all of it. There's even room, I think, to take your phone and watch a 10-second little short that somebody makes. I think my generation didn't have that. We had TV and movies, that was it. But my kids and myself, we have so many opportunities to see what so many people are thinking about the world and how they see the world and how they're expressing it. So this is one of the most golden times I think we've ever experienced.
Tom, what about for you, the scripts that come to you? Do you feel as though they've gotten better over the years, worse over the years?
Well, look, quite frankly, I'm older now, and a different thing happens. I'm not, I don't ponder, there's some stories that come by, and they're for 36 years old, and I'm not 36 anymore. The stuff that I read, there's a way this thing works. There's movies that are never going to see the light of day. And they're written, and they're fine, and they might be great, and the only reason they're sending to you on the off chance that you'll want to do it, so therefore it might get made. And you can kind of like smell those things out. By and large, it's when it's there, it is so undeniably there that you end up leaping at it. You can't. One of the great tests is that. I know a guy that went to his agent and said, should I do this movie or shouldn't do it? And the agent said, well, if somebody else does it, are you going to shoot yourself in the head? And the guy went, yeah, I guess I got to do this movie. Yeah. You can't, you're so selfish and you're so moved by the story that you become a man possessed and you sort of have to do it. All the other stuff is, just finds its place in the food chain.
Do either of you have a movie that you almost didn't make and then you were so glad you did?
Almost didn't make.
Almost didn't make,
and then so glad we did.
Lincoln, I almost didn't make it because I couldn't get it cast, and also we had trouble getting co-financing because nobody thought that anybody would go see, in 2013 a movie about Abraham Lincoln. It was a very, very hard sell, even within my own company, and that came very close to being an HBO movie.
The studio was one day away from pulling the plug on this one movie I was going to make, and the director came out to my house and said, look, this is going to fall apart because they won't give us the budget for shooting this one sequence, and we've got to have this sequence, and you're my partner in this, and if you don't do it with me, then there's no reason for us to do it at all. And I said, well, how much what's the budget? And they said, it's X amount of dollars. And he said, I think we should split it. You and I will pay for it out of our fee. And that way we'll get to make the movie. And we'll get some money on the back end for it as a reward. I said, all right. And the secret was Forrest running across the country.
Oh, wow.
And we were 48 hours away from it being so I'm glad that worked out.
LC Screen Talk from Colorado Mills and Lakewood. What has made your long-standing professional collaboration such a success?
The movies haven't been too bad.
They haven't sucked yet.
They haven't sucked. I've yet to make my last Steven Spielberg movie. That's a good thing. I don't want to be that guy. What are you working on now? I'm working on my last Steven Spielberg.
Well,
that's not a smart thing to do.
We got to figure this out because, you see, now Tom is tied with Harrison Ford. Harrison and I did 4 movies. Tom and I had done 4 movies. Now I'll probably do an Indy 5 with Harrison. It'll be 5 for Harrison, 4 for Tom. I got to make another one with Tom. So it'll be 5 for Tom, 5 for Harrison. And I think I'm going to leapfrog that way for the rest of my career.
Can I just play the bad guy
with
in the
Daniel
next one?
Day-Lewis and everything else?
Curses. Peter at AMC Edina in Minneapolis. Edina or Edina?
Edina.
Edina, sorry.
Edina.
Peter, I knew I had that wrong. Peter at AMC Edina.
Former high school hockey championships for the state of Minneapolis.
Wow.
Ooh, wow.
Edina.
Peter asks, what is something you will take and hold on to from this movie?
I think everybody, of course, the movie is for individuals, not for the group. I really believe that movies speak to every individual in the audience, not just the audience itself. So that's really what you're going to determine. I also don't want to give you a road sign and direct you to what I think you should hold on to from this movie. I can only tell you what I am holding on to and one of the reasons I made the film. And that just basically is, you have to know when to fight. You have to know what to fight for. You have to know when to fight for something, and you have to always, always be mindful that you never become a bystander in any situation where you can affect a change and make a difference and save a life and save somebody from being bullied or save somebody from being thrown into a kangaroo court and getting into the criminal justice system where they really shouldn't be, convicted of treason, let's say, which he wasn't guilty of. So I just think it is about an upstanding man who, as I started to say, stands firm on his principles and wouldn't compromise and wouldn't even blink. And he brought somebody home. He brought 2 kids home.
Tom?
Well, I stole a clock from the hotel room in Berlin. So I'm just being so flip because, what are you going to do? When you were saying that, I heard French horns playing in the background. Steve.
Yeah,
very lovely. There was this. You get when you read it and it's really working and you want to do it. You have this very kind of like personal vision that is only inside your own head of how it could be. And when I was reading this and I saw the moments where I, as an actor and as a character, Donovan, was going to be waiting, waiting to find out something, waiting for a phone to ring, waiting for someone to show up on the other edge of the bridge, and I thought, in Stephen's hands, this is going to be dynamite, because no one can wreak more cinematic juju out of a scene than Stephen. And look what's happening. There's no big Sturm und Drang. There's no explosions. There's no big music. But it's literally just human beings waiting for a phone to ring, and they don't even say anything when they pick up the phone. When you see it and it comes out as great on screen because of what the boss did, as it did in your own head, that's just the high country, man. That's when you're really glad to be an actor and get to work.
I cannot imagine. That was the perfect amount of applause for that answer.
It could have gone on a little longer. All right, I now bring it to a close. Thank you very much. You guys are like a communist party band. We will all applaud that answer for even longer to show our solidarity with the speakers. It's very good.
Can't imagine a better way to spend an evening than to see a Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks movie and then talk to Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks.
Well,
that's
great
great.
talking to all of you.
Congratulations on the movie.
Everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So long, Toronto, Lakewood, Yonkers,
Lakewood,
Edina.
All the territories. Thank you. Oh, look, and there's Wilson.
There's Wilson.
There's Wilson.
Wilson was not a pink volleyball.
It's a gay Wilson.
Maybe he
That's good.
was. Maybe he was. What have you.
All right.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.